Righto, thank you so much for being here today, and we're going to have a great panel. At least I think we will. It really doesn't depend on the moderators, it turns out, but I will be asking our esteemed panelists who are in the boardroom a lot questions that are focused really on Maryland's economy. To my immediate right is a gentleman named Augie Chisera, one of the finest business people in our state, and then I'll go to the balance of the panelists, ask questions, and we'll leave some time at the end, of course, to turn our attention to the audience. So Augie, M&T Bank, Wilmington Trust. Actually, you are the second person I've shared the stage with from M&T Bank and Wilmington Trust. I was on the stage this morning in Talbot County, Maryland, with a person named Megan Hsu, who is a very high-powered, often on CNBC, so on and so forth, financial advisor. And she indicated that the risk of recession in the US over the next 12 months, according to her team's research, is 45%. Other brokerage/banking research teams put it at 30 to 40%, whatever, but it's elevated relative to norm. Normally, a risk of recession is 10 to 15%. What are you seeing in the marketplace right now in your very overarching role at M&T Bank?
So look, I think you heard from Megan directly today, so you've got the inside scoop in terms of what we're seeing, what we're hearing. And what's amazing to me is it almost appears to be a tale of two cities. Where on the one hand, some of our businesses and industries are doing fine, and then in some other cases where there's a heavy dependence on government jobs or government payments, that's where things tend to be getting a little softer, if you will.
And what about Maryland? You have an overarching position, as I say, at M&T Bank. You have multiple states. It's a super regional bank. Super bank, by the way. It's the bank that we've done our business banking with as a company for 21 years. And so when you look at economic activity in Maryland versus the other states in which you're operating, what do you see?
You know, it's funny, I pulled some stats in preparation for our conversation today, and the one that jumped out at me was as of September 2025, the state has lost approximately 15,000 federal jobs. And that is just, to me, it's a staggering statistic on the impact that these job cuts will have on the state's economy. And hopefully this will get resolved quickly, but I don't know. And that's probably where we're seeing at least the biggest stress in the Maryland marketplace at this point.
As I understand it, Augie, we've had actually some layoffs affecting other Marylanders, this time at the Department of Education, just in the last few days. And so it continues. Since January, our state has not added any jobs, as it turns out. 15,000 jobs minus the 15,000 from the federal government. So 15,000 jobs added in other segments of the economy. And so we've got some issues here. I'm going to come back to you, Augie, and talk about how we can solve this. But for now, let me go to Shanetta Griffin. Shanetta, airport, BWI Airport. And, I, as it turns out, have the good or bad fortune of being in many airports, and there's nothing as good as the BWI experience. I wish you had more men's retail, but set that aside.
We'll work on that. We'll work on that.
Sometimes I forget to wear a belt. But anyway, I think you're celebrating a 75th year anniversary right now.
That's correct.
I think we can agree that Friendship Airport / Baltimore Washington Thurgood Marshall International Airport has had a glorious first 75 years. I have seen presentations indicating the plans for the future at BWI. And they are Chinese-like in their grandeur. The Chinese are famous for big public works projects. Tell me about your progress now and going forward in terms of realizing some of that vision for BWI Airport. In particular, tell the audience what that vision is and then what the timetable is for realizing that vision.
Well, I thank you for the question. And first, let me, thank the Banner for having these types of conversations, because this is what's important as we think about the future of Maryland and where we're headed. So first, the second thing I want to do is I want to thank our federal workers. We have several federal workers, almost 800 federal workers who are at the airport every day, making sure that all of us are safe and secure, even though they're not getting paid. So we certainly appreciate them. We certainly appreciate them and appreciate everything that they do every day. So I want to make sure I say that. When I think about the future of BWI, Thurgood Marshall Airport, and again, you mentioned Friendship Airport. So when it was dedicated by President Truman, he talked about the future. And that's what we're looking at now. We're looking at the future and what does that mean. So there's a lot of things that we want to do in preparation for the next 75 years and where we're going and how that's going to be. We're about $11.3 billion of economic impact for the state of Maryland. And we have about 107,000 jobs that are just with BWI, not including Martin State and the regional airports that we have across the state of Maryland. So how are we going to build on that economic impact? How are we going to make sure that as we think about industry development, we think about new companies coming into the state of Maryland, the airport is the gateway to that level of economic impact. We're the ones that are bringing people into the airport. We're considered an origination and destination airport. So our communities are driving that level of impact. We're at about 27 million passengers currently, and hopefully by 2045, we're looking to be at about 38 million passengers. Well, what does that mean for the economic impact and the capital improvement that we're looking to do for the future? So right now, we're operating in a state of good repair. We have a lot of old infrastructure that we need to build upon. We need to make sure that that's preparing us for the future. But we have a lot of capital investment. We have about $830 million of capital investment needs for the next 6 years. So again, when we think about what we're doing now, when we're building upon what we have now, but we're also thinking about the future and moving that forward. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Shanetta, that's
you.
for sure. Michael Davis, retirement is among your focal points as a professional at T. Rowe Price. It's a big issue for Maryland, of course. I recently went into a store called Ruth Shaw with my wife. It's a very nice clothing store in Baltimore City, as it turns out. Cross Keys is where it's at. And this is the kind of store in which you walk in and there's it's like a Hillary Clinton type pantsuit on sale for $1,400, So I'm basically showing my wife the possibilities, but I'm not going to actually buy anything, right? So what she might have looked like if she had married better. So I walked in there one day, and there's a point to this. I walked in one day and I saw a group of other Marylanders. Actually, these are quite successful people. I didn't know them as friends, but I know who they are. And all of them were talking about, well, should we move to Boca or Fort Lauderdale? Mm-hmm. Should we move to Naples or Fort Myers or Marco Island or Clearwater, whatever it happens to be? Mm-hmm. So first, let me ask you this question. There are a lot of things that go into retirement planning, right? Portfolio allocation, do you follow the 4% rule, all these kinds of things, right? Tax implications. But what would you say about locational decisions, about the decision about whether or not to locate in Maryland for your retirement or go someplace else? What's some of the thinking behind that?
Well, first of all, just thanks for having us. Thanks to the Banner for hosting. Great to see everybody here. Just a joy to be here. I bid you greetings on behalf of T. Rowe Price. We manage a lot of retirement assets. 2/3 of the assets we manage at the firm are retirement. We think about it all the time. I'm head of global retirement strategy, so it is what I do day, noon, and night. To your question about Maryland as a retirement destination, I think there are a lot of reasons that people would want to live here. I think one, just the coastline, right? It's a very moderate sort of environment from a weather perspective, and then you have so much coastline that's available for people to see. It's easy to get to, easy to access. But I think you talked about Fort Myers and a lot of these other places, and I don't want to impugn any other state, but I would argue that there's so many different cultural institutions that are accessible here, either educational or look at the Meyerson, right? I mean, the Meyerhoff. Just so many wonderful things for people to do here that are accessible. And I think a lot of people, they're living longer in retirement. So I'm giving a speech right after this around longevity rates and how so many people are living longer lives with much greater health care. And they want to do something with that time, right? They want to do either volunteer work or more educational things. And there's so many different avenues for them to do that in this area. I think it's really attractive.
Michael, I'm always, as an economist, thinking about taxes and cost of living and so on. So you make a very good point. The cultural elements that we have, and you can impugn other states. There's nothing wrong with that. And Florida, you're most welcome to impugn. But we have, and obviously, with the Walters Art Gallery and the Meyerhoff and Hippodrome and Center Stage and all the rest of it, But one of the things I'm also hearing from people is that Maryland has a moderate political climate. In other words, we're inclusive.
Yeah.
And that I've heard more and more people moving from the American South to retire here or have their careers here because they feel comfortable here. They feel included here. It's one of the great things about our state.
Yeah.
Do you, any insight into those kinds of dynamics?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, you mentioned the state is very diverse, and you see that in a lot of different ways. I know the governor was here earlier. I'm sure he talked about these themes when he was here. It's one of the reasons that we came to the area. So I moved up from Texas, and we just love it up here because of that. And it's diverse not only in terms of the people, and even as I look out to the audience, you see it here. But in terms of the cultural things that are available for people, it's not all one thing. There are different things that people can do, advantage themselves of. I think part of that is also a result of the educational institutions that are here. And obviously Baltimore, you have DC and the whole DMV area. There's just a lot of different options for people. And I just like the way that this area celebrates difference. We are in a time where that is not always as celebrated as perhaps I think it should be. And I think that there's more pressure on that kind of conversation than perhaps there ever has, certainly been in my lifetime. So the fact that this area celebrates it, uses it as an asset, I think is going to be a draw for a lot of people.
Thank you, Michael. But despite, Daniel Eggers, despite that uplifting message, and it was, and it's right, we are inclusive and a fabulous state, best state in the union, all those kinds of things, but this economy has struggled. For the first time in 52 years, we now lack a universal AAA bond rating. We're debt downgraded by Moody's earlier this year. Augie mentioned that job creation has slowed down significantly. In late 2023, our unemployment rate in the state was 1.9%. It's now 3.6%, which is not astronomical, but it's rising. Now, Constellation, of course, plays a very special role in this economy. Let's talk about one of the growth segments out there, which is, of course, artificial intelligence, but related to that, the heartbeat of artificial intelligence, which is data centers. Constellation, of course, one of the most important energy companies in the world. Tell us what Constellation is doing to help Maryland attract and power some of these data centers that many people aspire to have located in Frederick County or Calvert County or Harford County or other parts of the state.
Yeah, thanks for everybody being here. And it's sort of funny, I can't spend this much time in a conversation, all 11 minutes of it or whatever we've gone into, without it coming to data economy. So this is a relief that it took this long. But when you think about where the world is in our conversations, this is undeniably one of the most exciting economic times, I think, for the United States when you look at the promise of AI, what it means economically, what it means from a national security perspective, and the imperative that the United States wins AI, right? And you can see the money going into it and the investments going into it, which is really what's your question. You're seeing, of the four large hyperscalers, the big four, the biggest companies in the world, they're now going to invest $400+ billion in the data economy, data center driven, in this calendar year. These are numbers that we have never, ever seen from an investment perspective, right? And when you narrow that down and think about what can that mean for Maryland, we've announced big deals as Constellation in Pennsylvania and in Illinois around developing data centers. Another one of our peers announced a deal at their nuclear plant in Pennsylvania, the Susquehanna plant, where the largest investment ever in the state of Pennsylvania was a $20 billion investment by AWS associated with building out a data center around that facility. So at one location, a $20 billion investment. So when we look at Maryland and all the jobs it's created with building out these data centers, the property tax value that comes with them, the construction jobs, and typically the union-driven, labor-driven construction jobs, there's a huge economic opportunity. I think when we look at it as Maryland, we're seeing them get built in Virginia kind of day in and day out. They have owned that opportunity. They've owned that investment. They've owned that property tax and all those jobs. The part of the opportunity, what we want to do as Constellation, is support the ability for those dollars to get invested in Maryland instead of going somewhere else. And we can talk about things we're doing to continue to try and build out the energy infrastructure we have in the state for that to be successful for all of us.
Yeah, and Daniel, one of the things about data centers is this: they create a ton of tax base. They actually don't create a ton of jobs per $1 million invested, that kind of thing, right? But they create a ton of tax base. And a lot of these suburban counties in particular don't want a lot of population growth. Right? I believe Carroll County and Harford County would prefer not to be on a map so no one could find them. Because one of the things they worry about is school overcrowding. But data centers create tax base without creating a lot of demand for public services. And so one of my frustrations is that we haven't figured this out the way the other states have in terms of attracting that tax base. I don't know if you...
I think that's part of it. You know, we own a quarter of all the nuclear power plants in the United States as Constellation. We'll have a plant in a rural part, not in Maryland, but in another state, where our property taxes are 40 to 50% of the county's tax revenues, right? That is one facility generating an enormous amount of revenues, supporting the schools, the fire department, and all those sorts of things. I think when you think about the scale of investment you're looking at with these data centers, there's a huge opportunity for tax base. There are jobs that are going to be at the data centers, and if you actually start to dig into the data, you see people build around the data centers. Things start to pop up that are supported by that. They have more infrastructure. There's more of a pull for jobs there that I think they get a little underrated in how much job they create. But you know, when you think about building a 1,000-megawatt data center, a $10 or $15 billion construction project, you think about how many people, how many trained laborers, how many apprentices go into that construction. There is a bunch of years with a huge investment in the beginning, which is beneficial. And if you keep that flywheel going of continuing to make investment, there's more and more of those opportunities, which is really important.
100%, very good. And Augie, you know, we've talked about the economy here. You mentioned some of the economic weakness. Let me ask you this, without trying to really put you on any kind of political spot, but we want Maryland's economy to be strong, create lots of opportunity for various types of people, professional services, construction, manufacturing, you name it, white collar, blue collar, you name it, Baltimore, Washington area, whatever, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, et cetera. What does Maryland need to do, in your judgment, to reposition itself to attract more private investment? Given that the federal government's not going to drive this economy the way it has in the past, how do we attract more private investment? What changes do we need to make as a state?
I think what's interesting, I really appreciate that question, Anirban, because I think it's less about what new do we need to do, and it's more about what do we have to execute on that's in front of us. You take a walk from Lexington Market to the harbor, and you'll end up, you know, stumbling across close to $1.3 to $1.5 billion in investment that's taking place in and around that area. So this isn't through a lack of money. It's a question of how do we take that investment and that capital and do something more with it. We've been having a lot of conversations around the table at the Baltimore Development Corporation about looking at the investment that was made with CFG Bank Arena and how we can use that as a driver for housing, as a driver for new business starts, and a driver for economic activity in general. And it's going to take all of us working together to be able to execute on what that vision is. And you don't have to look very far down the way to see all the exciting things happening with MCB Realty around the harbor and the investment that that promises to make. So I know there are things that we could hope for and wish for, but there are things on the docket today that we can execute against that would serve us extremely well for decades to come.
I agree with that. But let me talk about, just as an example, one parameter. You know, so we're Maryland. My very strong belief is if we were competing for private investment with Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Maine, no issues. But we're competing against Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina, Delaware. I mean, these are really competitive states economically. In North Carolina, their corporate tax rate is 2.25%. Ours is 8.25%. So don't we have to do more than simply execute on the vision? Don't we need to actually change a little bit to attract that private investment?
So, look, I think it's a combination of two pieces here, Anirban. I think what we do have going for us, which my fellow panelists happened to mention, was the infrastructure and the assets, whether it's educational assets, whether it's a labor force, and so on, that frankly businesses and organizations have access to when they come to Maryland. And I think that's the bet that you end up making on an educated workforce that can help lead us deep into the 21st century.
Very good, very good. Now, Shanetta, you heard earlier in this panel that Michael Davis was impugning the reputation of the state of Florida. And I found that very inspiring.
Let the record reflect.
I'd like to do something. It's fine, Michael, own that, own it. But I'd like to follow up on that by impugning something else's reputation, and that's Dulles Airport. Because Dulles, I don't like going there. I don't like being there at all. You know, it's a terrible place. And, you know, we have this Terminal E at BWI, our international terminal, and it's fabulous. You can hang out there and have a good day. But we don't have many international flights, as far as I can tell. what are we doing, or what are you doing, what is leadership at BWI doing, at the state doing, to try to reinvigorate global travel out of BWI?
Appreciate the question. And so can I just see a show of hands of how many people fly through BWI Airport? Awesome, 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 awesome. So it's the people that just raised their hands that will drive international travel, that will drive domestic travel for us. One of the things that we're focusing on very heavily now is the education of why airlines decide to fly to any airport. So that's very big for us, to make sure that people understand. If you say, hey, I want X number of flights, and I have enough people that say that, airlines are attracted to that. When it comes to international travel, I will say that our largest air carrier, Southwest Airlines, is really going to help us to push that forward. They are already in partnership with Iceland Air, and they're looking at other international partnerships, and they're starting to change their route schedule so that they can then attract more people from the West Coast. So international travel is one of the things that we want to continue to build upon, but those partnerships, again, just like we have British Air, if enough people are on those international flights, then that drives it. Again, I think that this is another place where when we talk about, you mentioned several other locations across that are close in proximity to us. If we think about how we can capture some of that other travel that's going to those locations through competitive marketing, through really ensuring that we can support airline travel, then that will help us to do that. Again, thinking about the industries. You know, there's a lot of industry development that wants to occur. People use airports as a part of that equation. If you have a viable airport that you can get from place to place, you can go there direct, or you have maybe one stop, that becomes important. That's our conversation right now. As we're talking with airlines, and we're talking with tons of airlines, both domestic and international. We're going international to meet with some of these airlines. So that has to be the driver, but it's also about the community. It's the community that makes airports decide where they want to go. We can do all the marketing we want, but we have to have that level of community. The other piece is incentives. Every state around us has a level of incentive, financial incentive, to encourage airlines to come, especially international airlines. So we're losing out in that regard in the state of Maryland. Internationally, Dulles will continue to be outstanding in that area because they have the infrastructure. We also have to build that infrastructure. We have to show that support to international airlines, that we can hold them in our Custom and Border Patrol areas, that we can take them through all of the inspections that they need to do. So all of that comes a part of that equation, but that's things that we're working on now to build that infrastructure to make sure as we get those airlines in, we have their needs, that can meet their needs.
Wonderful, thank you. Michael Davis, retirement. Global retirement, as it turns out. Now, people in this audience, they're of different ages, different occupations, different wealth profiles, different risk tolerance, so on and so forth. I notice gold is sitting at $4,100 an ounce, and Bitcoin's at $114,000, and NVIDIA stock and all these other stocks have risen in value. How are you advising people right now when asset prices are already so high in terms of investing? What do they buy right now? If you just give some people a general sense of, you know, if they're just starting out right now, what should they be thinking about how to deploy their savings?
Well, you know, the thing that we always tell investors is to be diversified. And, you know, this time we would say that. If it was 2 weeks from now, we would say that. If it was 2 years from now, we would say that. It is important for people to be diversified. And we do think that there is a role for advice. And for an advisor, be it a robo-advisor, maybe something that you might use online, or if you can, someone in person that can help walk you through what is available to you and just how best to manage the money that you have. We do think that it's really important for people to retire with dignity, that they work very hard over the course of their careers. Some of them have access to retirement income through a pension plan. Not everybody has that. Most people now have 401k plans that, you know, you have to own the responsibility for the investment profile yourself. And some people need help with that, right? And it's not a bad thing. But at the end of the day, it's not about what you buy. It's about how diversified you are, and are you in the right risk profile for your age and for your profile, and making sure you stick with that. And if you stick with that and just exercise discipline around it, you tend to have great outcomes.
And Daniel, I got to tell you, one of the smartest things I did as a 20-something, when I was a 20-something, other than moving to Baltimore, is I bought a couple of no-load T. price mutual funds, and they have done very well by me. Now I'm no longer quite in my 20s, so thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Daniel, let me talk about a story that didn't capture as much attention as I think it ought to have. It got some media attention, but it's the deal that Constellation made regarding Conowingo Dam. As I understand, that's our largest single source of renewable energy in this state. You correct me if I'm wrong. Tell us about that deal. I believe Constellation is actually putting forth a lot of capital in support of this community.
Yeah, no, it was a very exciting deal. It got some attention in some spots, but probably not as much as it warranted, right? We, as Constellation, provide about 90% of all the carbon-free electricity in the state of Maryland, Conowingo being the biggest renewable resource. We have wind, and then we have the Calvert Cliffs nuclear power station. You think about investment in the state. Last decade, we spent over $1 billion investing in those assets. With this deal we just announced, in coordination with the state, we are going to invest $340 million associated with Conowingo really into the Chesapeake Bay, so much more of an environmental response separate from the maintenance of the plant, but as far as how we think about the bay, how we think about the environmental stewardship of the area to make sure that we keep a clean bay and our responsibility there. So we're going to be able to maintain the operation, as you said, of the largest renewable resource in the state for the next 50 years and put an enormous amount of money back into the bay, which we're excited we were able to do with the state.
Yeah, so you've heard a couple of big numbers here already, $1.5 billion, $340 million. It starts to add up after a while, and so that's very, very encouraging. Of course, the huge plans at BWI in terms of your capital program. And then, of course, T. Rowe Price, you know, your new headquarters at Harbor Point, it's glorious. It's worth seeing. If you haven't seen it, it's just phenomenal. And it's also a physical manifestation of your commitment to this community.
Yes. Yes.
As has M&T Bank and Constellation also with their massive presence in this area. And of course, BWI has to be here, and so you have no choice. But nonetheless, we thank you for being here. Let me turn. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Muted. Oh, here we go. So we have a question from the audience that asked, as leaders, what keeps you up at night right now, and what's giving you hope?
Yeah, what keeps you up at night? Anyone can jump in. What's your greatest concern, your greatest worry?
So if I may start, safety and security is number one. Where we are right now in regards to what we're dealing with our federal workers impacts safety. And so that is, when I think about the people, like I mentioned, you know, and I thank you all for clapping, because I think about those people that are coming to work every day. That could be any of us that are coming to work and not being paid. So at some point in time, people make personal decisions on what that looks like. If we'd have any levels of interruption, then that means safety of our national airspace. And that keeps me up at night because of the fact that I know that, you know, people want to be there, but they're tired, all of the types of things that we are as human beings. So that keeps me up at night. I think the biggest thing from a challenge place that I feel good about, though, is the fact that we're in a place, the aviation industry is evolving every day. And there's a lot of good things that are coming out of the industry. I don't know if the governor mentioned this morning, but he put together a council for advanced air mobility. So when we talk about energy, electrification, all of the types of things for this business model to work, I think about the growth and the opportunity for the aviation industry. And that helps me to feel better about the other pieces that I know are really challenging right now for a lot of people, and again, over 800 persons that we have at the airport. So for me, that's the answer to that question.
All right, and we have one last question. As business leaders, what's the smartest risk that you've taken that's paid off?
What's the smartest risk you've taken that's paid off?
We're buying the second largest competitive power generator in the United States. So on the other side of this quarter, we'll be the largest producer of electricity in the United States, about 40% more than anybody else. So I think taking a risk and to putting a lot of capital to work to reinvest back into the power system today, given the huge amount of electricity demand, everybody's focused rightly on the affordability of their utility bills. We made a big bet, a $30 billion bet to make sure we could help with reliability for the system. So that was our bet this year.
That's great. No, that's great. Because it's great to see a Baltimore company on the front foot, because so many of our companies have been acquired over time, and yet here you are, the acquirer. And so that's just absolutely wonderful. What else?
I would just offer, you know, T. Rowe Price has invested about $114 million in small and diverse-owned businesses in Maryland. And the yield on that is about 2x in terms of its impact on the economy. So we're betting on Maryland, and we're really excited about it.
That's great. That's wonderful.
Awesome. Let's give one more round of applause.
Yeah, the panel is over. That was it. Thank you very much. So, I mean, it's done. We're done. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thank the panelists. Big applause for them.